When do you think it's right, okay, for an individual in the United States to denounce human rights violations in another country as compared to when do you think it's either hypocrisy or interference? Now I'm talking individual, not the government.
Well, again, it's a question of priorities.
Right.
And priorities.
I'm not saying how much time you should put into it. When is it literally?
If there are human rights violations somewhere, it makes sense to criticize them.
Period.
It makes sense to criticize them if you can do something about them. If you can't do anything about them, it's just posturing. But if you can help human rights activists or press people or whatever somewhere else, sure, you should do it. The question is always priorities. Time and energy are finite. Can't get around that. And the question is, how do we compare? How do we decide how to distribute our energies when there are human rights violations? And there are very clear criteria for that. They are almost 100% violated, but they're extremely clear. What you prioritize is what any moral human being does. The predictable consequences of your own actions. That's what should be prioritized. I mean, somebody else's actions, I can criticize them, but there's no particular moral value to it, unless I can somehow improve things. The one thing you can improve is what you are doing. So overwhelmingly, our priority ought to be our own engagement in human rights violations, which we can change. And incidentally, that's kind of independent of scale. Even if the ones we're carrying out are not so terrible and the ones that somebody else is carrying out are awful, but we can't do anything about it, then elementary morality says let's focus on ourselves. The practice is almost the reverse, almost 100% the reverse. And furthermore, it's kind of irreversible. I mean, there's great pleasure taken in the crimes of others, especially if we can't do anything about them. If some enemy, particularly if it's an enemy, if some enemy commits horrible crimes and we can't do a thing about it, it's just irresistible to posture heroically about their crimes. For one thing, it's costless because you can't do anything about it. And for another thing, it shows how noble you are. Another thing is you can lie like a trooper. You can say anything you want. And if anybody says, well, man, maybe that's not quite accurate, you can come back and say, oh, you're a genocide supporter, you're in favor of Holocaust. So the whole stream of techniques is available. So it's just perfect. And intellectuals just love it, In fact, you see it all over the place. I mean, there's even a new literary genre that developed in the last 10 or 15 years, which is very highly respected. And that is castigating ourselves for not criticizing strongly enough the crimes of others. That's just marvelous. For one thing, you're criticizing ourselves, so look how moral you are. And you're criticizing ourselves for not doing enough about the crimes of enemies, which we can't do anything about. And in fact, if you look at the literature on this, it's astonishing. I mean, it's carried out like almost to a T. It's like a caricature of itself. And the people are nice people. Actually, I know some of them. Perfectly nice people, perfectly decent. They think we ought to really sacrifice ourselves, and castigate ourselves for not doing enough about, say, Pol Pot's genocide, which there was no suggestion about what to do about. But meanwhile, totally ignore everything we're doing.